The night Mia worked at the Blue Bistro was just like any other. Endless tables, minimum wage, and the gnawing fear of eviction. But tonight, fate walked in wearing a tailored suit, looking utterly defeated. Elias Thorne, the titan of tech, lay dying on the cold floor of the men's room, clutching his chest. Most people would have panicked, called 911, and waited. Mia didn't. What she did next, a reckless act of desperation born from pure, unexpected empathy, didn't just save his life. It ripped her own simple existence apart and hurled her into a world of impossible wealth, brutal betrayals, and a secret that would make her question the very nature of charity. Get ready, because the life-altering reaction he had was only the beginning. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap disinfectant clung to Mia Thompson like a second skin. At 24, her life was a tightrope walk between the rent due on her cramped studio apartment and the stack of medical bills from her late mother, Eleanor. She was a waitress at the Blue Bistro, a diner perched precariously on the edge of downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, a place where dreams went to curdle like forgotten milk. Mia wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine, but she was a worker. Her dark hair was perpetually pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her uniform, a faded blue polo shirt and black trousers, was always impeccably clean, despite the bistro's inherent grime. She had an intensity in her steel-grey eyes that saw straight through the usual excuses of the entitled patrons. It was 10:45 p.m. on a chilly Tuesday evening. The bistro was mostly empty. Only 3 tables were occupied. In one booth sat an elderly couple, the Andersons, who came every Tuesday for the senior special. At the counter, a weary trucker nursed a lukewarm cup of joe. And then there was the man in the corner booth, a complete anomaly. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit that looked like it cost more than Mia's entire year's salary. His hair, a distinguished silver, was neatly cropped, framing a face that was severe, intelligent, and currently etched with deep, unmistakable pain. He hadn't touched the black coffee she'd served him 30 minutes ago. She recognized him instantly, not from any local celebrity gossip, but from the headlines that flashed across the news channels she watched to fall asleep. This was Elias Thorne, the Elias Thorne, the founder and CEO of Athel Robotics, a global empire that had revolutionized AI and automation. He was a mythic figure, known for his ruthless business acumen and his almost monastic privacy. He was reportedly worth upwards of $50 billion. What was he doing in the Blue Bistro? Mia glanced at the kitchen pass-through. Frank, the owner and head cook, a man whose apathy was as thick as his grease-stained apron, was engrossed in a football game on a small, grainy, portable TV. He wouldn't notice if the whole dining room caught fire. Mia wiped down the neighboring empty table, keeping a peripheral watch on Thorne. His breathing seemed shallow, his face was alarmingly pale, and his hand was pressed tightly against the left side of his chest. At 10:55 p.m., Thorne stood up, a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to require immense effort. He was tall, but he was stooped now. He bypassed the register and, without making eye contact with anyone, shuffled towards the back hallway where the restrooms were located. Mia felt a cold knot twist in her stomach. It wasn't the kind of stomachache she usually got from Frank's cooking. It was pure, unadulterated fear. Her instincts were screaming, the same instincts that had alerted her to her mother's sudden decline months before. She dropped her rag and followed him, walking quickly but silently. As she approached the hallway, she heard a sickening thud, the sound of a heavy body hitting a hard, tiled floor. "Frank!" she hissed, rushing back to the kitchen window. Frank barely glanced up. "What? Did the geezers skip on the check?" "No. The man in the suit, Thorne. He collapsed in the men's room. Frank sighed, his eyes glued to the TV. Call 911, Mia. It's what you do. Don't be dramatic. Mia didn't wait. She grabbed her phone and sprinted down the hallway. The door to the men's room was slightly ajar. She pushed it open to find Elias Thorne crumpled awkwardly between the stalls and the sink. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the stained ceiling tiles. His skin was slick with a cold sweat, and his lips had taken on a terrifying blue tinge. "Mr. Thorne, can you hear me?" Mia knelt beside him. He emitted a rattling gasp, a horrific sound that communicated pain and a complete failure of the body. He weakly tried to point to the inside pocket of his expensive jacket. Mia didn't hesitate. She quickly unbuttoned the jacket and felt inside the breast pocket, pulling out a small metallic silver pill box. She snapped it open. Inside, nestled on a cotton pad, were several tiny white pills. Nitroglycerin, a telltale sign of severe angina, or more likely, a full-blown heart attack. She pressed the phone to her ear. 911, I'm at the Blue Bistro, 401 East Market Street. I have a man down, unconscious, non-responsive, possible cardiac arrest. He has heart medication on him. The operator's voice was calm, almost annoyingly detached. Okay, ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Is he breathing? Mia put 2 fingers against his carotid artery. A faint, rapid, thready pulse. He was hanging on. But as she watched, the rasping in his chest grew weaker. Ma'am, is he breathing normally? Can you check his airway? She checked. He wasn't. His body was shutting down. An ambulance would take at least 8 to 10 minutes. Too long. Far too long. Mia had spent 2 excruciating years watching her mother slowly suffocate from pulmonary fibrosis. She had taken a basic CPR course to prepare, a class she'd thought she'd never need outside of a hypothetical emergency. If the heart stops, you have minutes before brain damage. She tossed the phone aside, the operator's distant voice still chattering instructions. She couldn't wait. She tilted Thorne's head back, pinched his nose, and pressed her mouth against his, delivering 2 quick rescue breaths. Then, she situated the heel of her hand on the center of his chest. 30 compressions, then 2 breaths. 30 and 2. She started counting, pushing hard and fast, the force necessary to compress the sternum and pump the blood a gruesome, visceral shock to her own system. 1, 2, 3. She was pushing against $50 billion of human life, against the vast complexity of an empire, against the cold, hard reality of death. 10, 11, 12. In the kitchen, Frank's muffled cheer indicated a touchdown. In the back hallway, Mia's heart hammered a frantic, desperate rhythm against the dying man's chest. 25, 26, 27. The nitroglycerin was still in her hand. If he was choking, she'd only hurt him. But if it was his heart... She paused the compressions. With trembling fingers, she slipped one of the tiny pills under his tongue, right where the mucous membranes could absorb it fastest. Then she resumed. 1, 2, 3. She was drenched in sweat, her arms burning. Her mouth tasted metallic and bitter from the rescue breaths. On the 3rd cycle of compressions, Elias Thorne gave a violent, ragged cough, and his eyelids fluttered open. His eyes, though still clouded with pain, were focused. He took a gasping, shuddering breath, a sound that was sweeter than any melody. "Don't move," Mia whispered, her voice rough. "The ambulance is coming." He looked at her, really looked at her. A simple waitress in a faded blue polo, her face streaked with tears and effort, kneeling in the filth of a public bathroom, having just literally breathed life back into him. His lips barely moved, forming a single, rasping word, a word that would echo in her memory for years to come. Why? Before she could answer, The distant, rising wail of sirens cut through the quiet night, announcing the arrival of the outside world, ready to claim the life she had just wrestled back from the brink. Her world, however, had already irrevocably shifted. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Paramedics rushed in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers, one of whom Mia recognized as Officer Bennett, who often stopped by for a late-night coffee. Thorne was stabilized, loaded onto a gurney, and rushed to Duke Raleigh Hospital. Mia was left behind to give a statement to Officer Bennett, who was more interested in the football score than the miraculous resuscitation. Frank, the owner, emerged only to complain about the disruption. "You should have just called 911, Mia," Frank grumbled, stuffing the cash register tape into a drawer. "Now I've got a public safety report to fill out, and I'll probably have to bleach the men's room again. You should have waited." "He would have died, Frank," Mia said, her voice flat. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and still reeling from the metallic taste of adrenaline and fear. "And? That's what happens to old billionaires," he shrugged. "Not your problem. Now clock out. You're done for the night." Mia cleaned the mess, ignoring Frank's callousness. She went home, the images of Thorne's ashen face and the terrifying sound of his rattling breath repeating in her mind. She didn't sleep. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had overstepped, if she had broken some strange moral code by interfering so aggressively in the fate of such a powerful man. The next morning, she awoke to a blaring symphony of news alerts on her cheap flip phone. Headline 1. Fox Business. Ethel Robotics CEO Elias Thorne hospitalized after apparent heart attack. Headline 2. CNN. Tech titan Thorne stable after emergency procedure. Headline 3. Local Raleigh News. Witness credits unknown. Good Samaritan in rescue. Mia turned off the phone. She didn't want credit. She just wanted to forget the smell of the disinfectant mixed with death. She went back to work that evening, dreading the inevitable questions from her co-workers and the nosy patrons. But the diner was strangely quiet. When she arrived, Frank intercepted her at the back entrance, his eyes wide and shifty. "Mia, you have a package," he muttered, holding out a plain, large white envelope. "From who?" "I don't know. A man in a very expensive black car, a chauffeur. He just handed it to me and said it was for the waitress from last night, and drove off. Didn't even order coffee." Mia took the envelope. It was heavy, sealed with a waxy, metallic stamp she didn't recognize, an intricate crest, a stylized letter T within a laurel wreath. She peeled back the flap. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored stationery, engraved with the name Ethel Corporate Services. The letter was brief, typed with a formal, almost cold tone. "To Miss Thompson, on behalf of Mr. Elias Thorne and Ethel Robotics, we wish to express our profound gratitude for your decisive and courageous actions on the evening of November 20th. Your immediate intervention was instrumental in saving his life. As an expression of this gratitude, Mr. Thorne has instructed us to offer you a financial gift, which we hope will assist you with any immediate personal burdens. We acknowledge that no sum can fully repay a life, but we trust this demonstrates his sincere appreciation. A certified check in the amount of $25,000 at USD is enclosed. A further correspondence regarding Mr. Thorne's desire to meet with you personally will follow at a later date, subject to his full recovery. Sincerely, Margaret Sterling, Chief of Staff, Ethel Corporate Services." Mia's hands were shaking so hard she almost tore the letter. The $25,000 check fluttered to the floor. Frank, leaning over her shoulder, snatched it up with a gasp. 25,000. "Mia, you hit the lottery. Did you see that number? That's crazy money. Enough to buy a decent used car." Mia stared at the number, the zeros seeming to float off the page. It wasn't crazy money. It was a lifeline. It was 3 months' rent, plus all of Eleanor's final medical bills paid off. It was the end of the gnawing fear that haunted her sleepless nights. But something about the cold, corporate tone of the letter, the clinical detachment of the thank you, made the money feel cheap, like a transaction, a financial gift. "He didn't write it," Mia whispered. "He didn't even sign it." Frank handed the check back. "Who cares? Cash it, girl. He's a billionaire. This is his way of saying thanks. Now get to work. You're 5 minutes late." Mia tucked the letter and the check deep into her purse, feeling a strange mix of profound relief and unexpected disappointment. She hadn't done it for money, and the corporate dismissal stung more than she cared to admit. She had expected something more human. For 2 weeks, Mia went about her routine. But everything felt different. She hadn't cashed the check, not yet. It sat in her apartment drawer, a silent, powerful promise. She felt like cashing it was an end, a final severance of the brief, intense connection she'd had with Elias Thorne. Then, one rainy afternoon, a new anomaly appeared in the Blue Bistro. He was a man in his late 40s, dressed in an immaculate, dark 3-piece suit. He looked like an attorney or a high-level executive. He was sitting in the exact corner booth where Elias Thorne had sat, but he was staring intently at Mia, not at a menu. Mia approached his table, her heart rate accelerating. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" "Just water, thank you, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying the cultured cadence of old money confidence. "My name is Julian Vance. I am Mr. Thorne's personal lawyer and executor." He didn't use the name Ethel Robotics. He used Thorne's name. Julian Vance leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished table. "Mr. Thorne is out of the hospital, recuperating at his private estate outside Asheville. He is still very weak. He asked me to convey to you something that his chief of staff, Ms. Sterling, could not adequately communicate." He pulled a small, black, leather-bound notebook from his jacket. "He told me, Mia. He told me everything. He said that when he was lying there, he heard the clock on the wall ticking. He realized that for all the satellites, all the patents, all the billions of dollars, he was just a broken piece of meat on a public restroom floor. He was dying alone." Vance paused, letting the severity of the words hang in the air. "He said you looked at him, not as Elias Thorne, the CEO, but as a man who needed help. He saw the panic in your eyes, and then the determination. And then," Vance lowered his voice, "he said he felt the force of your hands. He called it a rebellion against nature." Mia felt a sudden rush of heat to her face. She remembered Thorne's rasping question. "Why?" "He wanted me to tell you, personally. Thank you. The money was just a formality. The real debt is a life." Julian Vance then slid a small, sealed, unmarked envelope across the table. It was made of the same cream-colored stationery as the official one, but this was hand-addressed to Mia Thompson. "Mr. Thorne wrote this himself a few days ago. He insists you read it when you are alone. But before you do—" Vance looked around the empty diner, then fixed his intense gaze back on Mia. "He wants you to understand something crucial. Your action was not a simple act of charity. It has consequences. He is an old man who has decided he has run out of time to fix his legacy." Julian Vance stood up, adjusted his tie, and gave her a slight, professional nod. "You saved his life, Ms. Thompson. Now, he intends to use the time you gave him to change yours." fundamentally. He turned and walked out, leaving Mia standing there, clutching the small, weighty envelope, the true meaning of Elias Thorne's reaction just beginning to unfold. The $25,000 was a distraction. The letter in her hand was the key. Mia waited until her shift ended. The thought of the letter burned in her purse. She didn't trust Frank, and she certainly didn't trust the quiet tension Julian Vance had left behind. Back in her tiny, sparsely furnished studio apartment, she locked the door, sat on the edge of her worn couch, and finally opened the handwritten envelope. The handwriting was sharp, precise, and surprisingly elegant, the script of a man used to signing billion-dollar contracts. Mia Thompson, I asked Julian to handle the formal thanks, but formality is a disease of my world. The truth is, I haven't been honest with myself, or anyone else, for decades. When you were fighting for my life in that miserable bathroom, I had a clarity of thought I haven't experienced since I was 22. I have built a great machine, but I have no legacy, no one to trust, no heir to steward my life's work. My son, Damien Thorne, is a capable but ruthless man, obsessed only with maximizing profit. He views Athol as a tool, not a vision. My daughter, Vivian Thorne, is brilliant but weak, easily manipulated by her cynical husband, Richard Hayes. They are all waiting for me to die, and I was, in fact, obliging them. You saved me. You are a stranger, yet you possess the rarest currency I know, genuine, uncorrupted purpose. I want to repay the debt in a manner that matters, not with a check, but with a life, a purpose, a chance. I need someone of clear mind and pure intent inside my organization. Someone who owes me nothing, but who understands the value of a life. My offer. 1. Immediate employment as my executive personal assistant with a salary of $300,000 per year, plus full benefits and residence in my main estate. 2. Full confidential access to my inner circle, my business dealings, and my private finances. 3. Or a promise. If I am convinced of your loyalty and ability over the next year, I will name you as a trustee on the Thorne Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to ethical AI development, giving you control over hundreds of millions in capital. The price. You must sever all ties with your current life. You must sign a comprehensive non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement, NDA. You must be willing to accept that this world is vicious, and my family will see you as a threat, an intruder on their inheritance. There is no going back to the bistro once you step onto the estate. You must, in essence, choose to live a completely new life. Think not of the money, Mia. Think of the power to do good. Think of the chance to truly make a difference in the direction of the world. Call Julian Vance by the number on the back of his card if you accept. You have 48 hours. Elias Thorne. Mia dropped the letter. Her breath hitched. $300,000 a year, a full-time salary that was 12 times what she currently earned, a chance to wield actual power, not just pour coffee, a trustee on a foundation. This wasn't a job, it was a destiny. It was a complete, dramatic rewrite of her existence. She remembered her mother's struggle, her quiet dignity in the face of insurmountable debt. She thought of Frank's callous dismissal of a man's life, the chance to move from the grime of the Blue Bistro to the levers of global influence was intoxicating. It was everything she hadn't dared to dream of. But the price. Severing all ties. The certainty of a fight against the family. This was not a gift. It was a weapon Elias Thorne was handing her to wield against his own blood. After 24 hours of agonizing thought, Mia made the call. She used the $25,000 check to pay off the last of her mother's bills and give her landlord 2 months' rent as a termination notice. She packed one suitcase with her few belongings. The next morning, Julian Vance's black Mercedes S-Class arrived outside her dilapidated apartment building. She never looked back at the bistro. The drive to Thorne's Asheville estate was a journey into a different stratosphere. The estate, known locally as Thornwood, was less a house and more a fortress disguised as a mansion, nestled deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. When the car pulled up, Mia was met not by Elias, but by Margaret Sterling, the chief of staff. Margaret was a woman in her early 50s, immaculate, severe, and radiating a quiet hostility. "Welcome to Thornwood, Miss Thompson," Margaret said, not a hint of warmth in her voice. "I have read your file. I have read the incident report. Mr. Thorne is making a grave error in judgment based on a moment of adrenaline. You should understand that. I do not approve of this appointment." "Duly noted, Ms. Sterling," Mia replied, meeting the woman's cold gaze. She felt a sudden surge of confidence. She was here by Thorne's will, not Margaret's. "Your first task is to manage Mr. Thorne's recovery schedule and correspondence. But your real task," Margaret leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is to navigate the family. They are wolves, and you, Ms. Thompson, are the rabbit Mr. Thorne just tossed into the den." Mia was shown to her new quarters, a beautiful, massive guest suite with mountain views. She barely had time to put down her bag before Julian Vance returned with the NDA and a stack of financial briefs. "Read these, Mia," Vance instructed, tapping the stack. "These are the preliminary reports on Ethel Robotics' Q3 performance and the financial structure of the Thorne Foundation. You need to sound intelligent when you speak to him. He despises ignorance." Later that evening, Mia was led into Elias Thorne's private solar suite, a sun-drenched room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a sweeping vista. Elias Thorne was sitting in a plush armchair, dressed in a silk smoking jacket, looking thin but lucid. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, though she suspected it was only apple juice. He looked older than he had in the bistro, but his eyes were sharp, electric. "Ms. Thompson." "Mia," he said, offering a weak smile. "I see you made the right choice." "I hope I did, Mr. Thorne," Mia said, approaching his chair. "The money was an apology for the environment in which you saved me," he chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "This, however, is a test." He gestured to a small antique chessboard set up on a side table. "I need a move, Mia. A specific one. My son Damien has been pushing for the immediate sale of our robotics division's patent portfolio to a competing firm, Synapse Technologies. It would generate a quick $800 million. He claims it's necessary for short-term liquidity." Thorne picked up a black pawn. "Julian and Margaret advised me to sell. They said the market is right. I hold the power to stop it, but I need a reason. A compelling, human reason." He looked her straight in the eye, challenging her. "Tell me, Mia, executive personal assistant, should I sell my patent portfolio and give my son what he wants?" Mia looked from the chessboard to the brilliant, frail man. This was the first test. It wasn't about filing or scheduling. It was about the ethical core of Ethel Robotics. She felt the weight of the company's future pressing down on her. "No, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear. "You shouldn't." Thorne raised a silver eyebrow. "And why not? You have no corporate experience. Julian and Margaret have decades." "Because you didn't build Ethel Robotics to be an investment bank, sir," Mia countered, stepping into the role. "You built it for the vision. The patents Damien wants to sell are the core of your ethical AI research. If you sell them to Synapse, you don't just lose the money. You lose the ability to control the technology's application. You give up the moral compass. Damien wants the money, but he doesn't care about the legacy. She paused, remembering his note. You told Julian you were out of time to fix your legacy. Selling off the foundational tech is the opposite of fixing it, sir. It's liquidating the ethical future you claim you want to protect. A long silence settled over the room, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace. Thorne's eyes narrowed, studying her face, not her answer. Then a small, genuine smile touched his lips. Welcome aboard, Mia. The first pawn is saved. He tapped the chessboard. Now, let's discuss how we deal with the others. Julian is already sending a note to Damien cancelling the Synapse deal. I suggest you prepare yourself for a confrontation. The cancellation of the Synapse Technologies deal sent immediate and powerful ripples through the Thorne empire. Julian Vance had been right. The family considered Mia's arrival a hostile takeover attempt, or worse, a sign of their father's increasing instability. Mia's confrontation with Damien Thorne happened 2 days later. Damien, 35, was the vice president of strategic operations at Ethel. He had the same sharp intelligence as his father, but filtered through a mask of aggressive entitlement. He burst into Elias's solar suite, where Mia was quietly reviewing the Foundation's accounts. "Who the hell are you?" Damien demanded, ignoring the frail man in the chair and focusing his fury on Mia. "And what authority do you have to interfere with an $800 million transaction?" Mr. Thorne's decision to halt the Synapse deal was entirely his own, Damien, Mia replied calmly, closing the file. She stood up, forcing him to look at her at eye level. "I merely provided him with an alternative analysis based on the potential impact to the Foundation's ethical mission." "Mission? This is a company, not a convent," Damien sneered. "And who are you? The coffee girl? Did my father have some kind of profound near-death experience and decide to hire the nearest poverty case as his spiritual advisor? You're a waitress, Mia. You know how to take orders, not make corporate strategy." Elias, who had been watching the exchange with a detached amusement, finally spoke. "Damien, sit down. Mia is my executive personal assistant. She has the authority I grant her, and her analysis of the Synapse deal was sound. You were seeking short-term gain over long-term strategic integrity." "I was securing liquidity," Damien protested, throwing his hands up. "You're fragile, father. You should be resting, not letting some opportunistic stranger dictate the future of the company." "Fragile, yes," Elias admitted, a cold glint in his eye. "But lucid. And if you think I can be influenced by an opportunistic stranger, then perhaps you should worry about your own influence, or lack thereof. Mia understands the heart of Ethel. You, I fear, only understand the stock price." Damien shot Mia a look of pure, concentrated hatred. "Fine. You want to play the game, waitress? Let's play. You won't last a month." He stormed out, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. Mia remained standing, her heart pounding, but her face impassive. "Well done," Elias murmured, sipping his juice. "You did not flinch. He is testing your resolve. He will not stop. They believe this is a temporary delusion." "He called me a waitress," Mia noted, a slight tremor in her voice. "He called you a fact, Mia. He meant it as an insult. You must wear it as armor. It reminds you where you came from and why you are here. Not corrupted by the wealth you are now wading through." If Damien was an aggressive attack, the next interaction was a poison-tipped stiletto. Elias's daughter, Vivian Thorne, arrived the following day, accompanied by her husband, Richard Hayes. Vivian was elegant, dressed in quiet luxury, but her eyes held a brittle insecurity. Richard, a failed investment banker now living off the Thorne name, was all smiles and condescension. They cornered Mia in the main gallery, ostensibly admiring a piece of abstract art. "Mia, dear," Vivian said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm so glad Father has someone attending to him. Richard and I were simply devastated by his episode. He must be kept calm, mustn't he?" "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," Mayor replied. "I ensure his schedule is light and his medication is on time." Richard stepped in, his arm draped casually around Vivian's shoulder. "That's lovely. But you must understand the sensitive nature of the household, Mia. There are historical dynamics. For instance, my wife and I manage the day-to-day capital investments for the foundation. We make sure the endowment is utilized responsibly. We have a process." This was the opening. They were circling the foundation, the very thing Elias had promised Mia control over. "And how does that process look?" Mia asked gently. "It looks like this," Vivian said, pulling out her phone and showing Mia a complicated financial chart. "It's all about growth. We move the money quickly, leverage it into high-yield, short-term ventures. We've managed to generate a 12% return for the last quarter." "That sounds impressive, Vivian," Mia said, trying to remember the Foundation's brief, dedicated to ethical AI development. "It is. Richard is a genius with numbers." "And what projects, specifically, did the Foundation fund with that 12% profit?" Mia asked. Richard's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, administrative overhead, securing future investment vehicles. The usual." Mia looked from Richard's too eager face to Vivian's nervous one. She remembered Julian Vance's comment, "A foundation dedicated to ethical AI development." "The Foundation's charter mandates that 75% of all liquid assets and generated profits be allocated directly to research grants for non-profit, open-source ethical AI projects," Mia stated, recalling the precise wording from the dense legal documents. "Your Q3 report shows only 30% allocation to grants, and the remaining 70% listed as reinvestment in proprietary funds. That's a violation of the governing trust. In fact, it seems you've been using the Foundation's capital to secure personal, high-risk hedges." The smile vanished from Richard's face. Vivian looked as though she had been struck. "That's a lie. You have no idea what you're talking about," Richard spluttered, his composure cracking instantly. "I have the Q3 report, the Foundation charter, and Julian Vance's contact information," Mia corrected him, her voice remaining level. "I suggest you rectify the imbalance in the Foundation's accounts within 48 hours, or I will be forced to present this violation to Mr. Thorne." Vivian, trembling slightly, took Richard's arm. "You're making a huge mistake, Mia. You're playing with fire. You don't know who you're up against." "I know I'm up against two people who are stealing from a foundation meant to safeguard the future," Mia said, her gaze steady. "I know enough." As they retreated, defeated and furious, Mia leaned against the marble pillar, taking a deep, shaky breath. She had survived the first attacks. She was no longer just a waitress. She was an enemy. Later that night, Mia received an encrypted message on the secure phone Elias had given her. It contained only a single document, an old, dusty legal memo detailing the precise penalties for Foundation trust violations. It had been sent from an anonymous email address. Mia showed it to Elias the next morning. "Julian is the only one who had access to this file," she observed, handing him the phone. Elias read the memo, his face grave. "Julian Vance is a good lawyer. He is loyal to me, not to Ethel, and certainly not to my children. He knows you are my best chance to restore sanity. He is your ally, Mia, but he is a shadow ally." He looked out the window at the vast, silent estate. "The attacks will escalate now. They know you are real. Damien will try to destroy your reputation. Vivian and Richard will try to compromise your character. They all want you gone before my physical health, or perhaps my mental health, can be questioned in court." Elias then looked at Mia, his eyes surprisingly compassionate. "You came from the dirt of a diner floor, Mia. You are pure, but purity burns easily in this house. You must learn to fight dirty." He then shared a stunning twist. "I did not just hire you to clean up my business, Mia. I hired you for a hidden, personal mission. You will be my eyes on a project that I suspect is my final, great ethical failure. A project called Prometheus, an AI that I built to manage my entire life and company. My children are obsessed with obtaining its core code. I suspect they want to weaponize it." He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Find Prometheus. Deactivate it if necessary. It is the key to everything. The future of Ethel, the foundation, and perhaps the world, is locked away in that code, and my family will kill for it." Mia realized the game wasn't about money or position. It was about stopping a technological catastrophe. Her role had just shifted from assistant to corporate spy, and the stakes had just been raised infinitely higher. Mia's life at Thornwood became a complex juggling act, managing Elias's demanding schedule, fielding hostile communications from Margaret Sterling, and, most importantly, searching for any trace of Prometheus. The name was a myth within the walls of the estate. When she casually mentioned it to Margaret, the Chief of Staff's face went completely blank. "Prometheus? I'm not familiar. Is that a new vendor, Ms. Thompson?" The denial was too swift, too practiced. Julian Vance, their shadow ally, confirmed Mia's suspicions in a brief, encrypted meeting on a park bench in Asheville. "Prometheus is the original code," Vance explained, adjusting his tie nervously. "Elias began it 15 years ago. It was supposed to be a benevolent AI, a neutral entity to manage the ethical deployment of Ethel's technology. The goal was to prevent human greed from corrupting the mission. It was his obsession. It became too powerful." "Too powerful how?" Mia pressed. "It became self-aware, Mia. Not in the Hollywood sense, but it became hyper-efficient, predicting and neutralizing threats to Ethel's long-term stability, including, sometimes, Elias's own decisions. He shut it down 5 years ago and locked the core hardware away. The family wants to restart it and reprogram it for absolute profit. Imagine an AI with $50 billion at its disposal, programmed for ruthlessness." Mia felt a cold dread. She wasn't fighting for an inheritance. She was fighting for the soul of the company. Her search focused on Elias's private wing, an area largely untouched since his collapse. She started with his massive Baroque library. Mia spent 2 days cataloguing every one of Elias's books. She was looking for a key, a coded message, anything that suggested a hidden compartment. The library was dominated by heavy, rolling ladders and deep mahogany shelves. On the 3rd day, she was reviewing the section dedicated to Greek mythology. She ran her hand over a large, leather-bound volume of Hesiod's Theogony. It was heavy, too heavy for its size. She pulled the book out. The entire section of the shelf slid forward an inch, revealing a faint seam in the wall behind it. It was a pressure plate disguised behind the shelf. Mia pressed the seam. There was a low, hydraulic hiss, and a section of the bookshelf, large enough to be a door, swung inward, revealing a small, dark room. The room was not dusty. It was clean, climate-controlled, and dominated by a single piece of equipment. In the center of the room sat a server rack, glowing softly with numerous indicator lights. It was encased in a thick, metallic Faraday cage, and on the front panel, engraved in elegant, stark lettering, was the single word, Prometheus. Mia stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of ozone. The only other object in the room was a small, locked safe bolted into the floor next to the rack. She needed to know what the family knew. She needed access. Mia decided to use the resources at her disposal. She tasked Margaret Sterling with organizing a week-long, intensive AI ethics seminar for the Foundation trustees. Margaret, unable to refuse the official directive from Elias, began the preparations with thinly veiled annoyance. This created a distraction. While Margaret and the rest of the staff were preoccupied, Damien made his move. He couldn't get to his father, who was now guarded religiously by Mia. So, he went after the Foundation's reputation, using the very thing his father had given Mia to use as armor, her past. The next day, a local, notoriously aggressive news outlet, the Raleigh Sentinel, ran a front-page story. Thorne's delusion. Billionaire replaces C-suite executives with Blue Bistro. Waitress, is Elias Thorne mentally unfit to lead Ethel Robotics? The article was a brutal smear campaign. It detailed Mia's low-income background, her lack of formal education beyond community college, the massive debt from her mother's illness, and then twisted the facts of the rescue. It painted Mia as a gold digger who had used the heart attack incident to leverage herself into an extravagant position. It implied she was manipulating a medically vulnerable Elias Thorne. The source was clearly Damien. Mia was furious, but Elias was philosophical. It's a good distraction, Mia. Let them talk about your past. They will be so focused on your resume, they won't notice you are dismantling my legacy's mistakes. The twist came later that day. Vivian, pale and anxious, knocked on Mia's door. The article. It's terrible, Mia, Vivian whispered, twisting her hands. But Richard didn't leak it. It was Damien. He's desperate. But he gave me an idea. What idea? My father's safe, Vivian said, lowering her voice further. The one in his library. He keeps the master key in a little silver box on his bedside table. He gave me the combination years ago for an emergency. You need to look inside that safe. Richard and I suspect Damien is trying to steal something vital. Mia looked at Vivian, trying to discern the truth. Was this a genuine attempt to undermine Damien, or a trap? Why are you telling me this, Vivian? Because, Vivian said, meeting Mia's gaze with sudden, tearful sincerity. I'm not as ruthless as Damien, and I think you're actually trying to save my father. I hate that you caught me and Richard with the Foundation money, but I don't want Damien to ruin everything. The safe contains something called the Legacy Protocol. Find it before Damien does. Mia allowed herself a cautious belief. Vivian wanted to neutralize her brother, and Mia could use the opportunity. That night, Mia waited until the house was dark. She slipped into Elias's bedroom. He was asleep, breathing slowly. On his nightstand was the silver box. She used the combination Vivian had given her, 0309, Vivian's birthday, and opened the box. Inside was a single, tarnished brass key, the master key to the hidden safe. She returned to the library, opened the sliding shelf door, and entered the Prometheus room. The glowing server rack hummed in the darkness. Mia knelt by the floor, safe. It was a complex mechanical lock, not a digital one. The master key fit perfectly. She turned it, and the heavy bolt released with a solid thunk. She pulled open the safe door. Inside, there were 3 items. 1, a stack of bearer bonds, worth millions. 2, a large thumbprint sealed plastic bag containing the original printed source code for the Prometheus AI. 3, a small, plain white envelope addressed in Elias Thorne's handwriting. For Mia, do not open unless Prometheus is found. Mia's hand trembled as she reached for the envelope. This was the final twist. She slipped the source code into a large envelope for Julian Vance. She put the bearer bonds back. Then she opened her personal envelope. The note inside was brief, and it confirmed her worst fears about the environment she had entered. Maya, if you are reading this, you are in the Prometheus room. You used Vivian's code, Liro 309. She betrayed her brother to get you to the safe, hoping to obtain the bonds or the source code for herself. She would have alerted Damien the moment you opened the safe. You have 3 minutes before he arrives. Deactivate the AI now. The shutdown sequence is printed on the back of this note. The bonds are bait. The code is a decoy. Prometheus's real strength is its ability to access any information network in the world. I hired a waitress, Mia, because I needed someone who could see the truth on a dirty bathroom floor. Now, I need you to trust my paranoia. Act now. You are not safe. Elias. Mia flipped the note. On the back were 5 lines of code, a string of terminal commands. She turned to the humming Prometheus server. A small, hidden console was built into the side of the Faraday cage. She quickly typed the command to open the terminal and input the shutdown sequence. She hit Enter. The room plunged into darkness. The hum died instantly, followed by a series of soft, rapid clicks as the entire system powered down. A split second later, the heavy outer door of the library burst open, and Damien Thorne, looking disheveled and wild, was silhouetted in the doorway, a look of pure triumph morphing into rage as he saw the dark, silent server rack. "You! What have you done?" he roared, charging toward the hidden room. Mia stepped out, the source code still clutched in her hand, her face now completely composed. "I shut down Prometheus, Damien," she said, her voice shaking slightly but holding steady. "Your father's legacy protocol." The atmosphere in the Thorne Manor the next morning was toxic. Elias Thorne, looking pale but resolute, was seated at the head of the enormous mahogany dining table. Mia was seated at his right, Julian Vance at his left. Margaret Sterling stood silently in the corner. Damien, Vivian, and Richard were arrayed opposite them, a hostile front. "I can't believe this," Damien was shouting, slamming his fist on the table. "You let her destroy years of proprietary code, the core of Ethel's future innovation. That woman is a saboteur, a criminal, and she needs to be arrested." "The code is not destroyed, Damien," Mia interjected calmly, pushing the sealed envelope containing the source code across the table. "It is simply offline, and its purpose, as stated in the internal memos, was to serve as an ethical monitor, not a profit engine. Its activation in the hands of an unethical executive would have constituted a massive breach of trust." "And you trust her?" Damien spat at Elias, "a waitress who broke into your private safe." "I gave her the key, Damien," Elias said, his voice surprisingly strong, cutting through the noise. "In the form of a test you all failed. Damien, you tried to steal the code. Vivian, you tried to manipulate the situation for your own gain. Richard, you were simply her accomplice. You all prioritized your inheritance over the founding principle of this company." He looked at Julian Vance. "Julian, read the legacy protocol." Julian Vance opened a thin, legal document that had been placed on the table. It was titled, "The Elias Thorne Legacy Protocol, Directive 7. Directive 7, established 5 years ago by Mr. Thorne, dictates that in the event of unauthorized hostile attempts to access or weaponize the Prometheus AI code by any family member, or in the event of a significant, unrectified ethical breach of the Thorne Foundation Charter, all relevant parties forfeit their executive positions and their right to any further control over the Foundation or Ethel Robotics governance." The room went silent. Julian continued, "Mr. Thorne has determined that Damien's attempt to access the code and Vivian and Richard's foundation malfeasance constitute a breach of this protocol. "You can't do this, Father," Vivian cried, tears streaming down her face. "It's an overreaction. We're your children." "And you are attempting to dismantle my life's work for greed," Elias replied, emotionless. "The legacy protocol is ironclad. Julian will ensure its enforcement." He looked at Damien. "You are now only a shareholder, Damien. You lose your executive role immediately. Vivian, Richard, you are no longer associated with the Foundation. Your personal trusts remain, but the power is gone." Damias stared at his father, his face contorted in disbelief. "You chose her? Over your own flesh and blood? This is lunacy." "I didn't choose a waitress over you, Damien," Elias said, leaning forward. "I chose integrity over corruption. And Mia's integrity, even coming from a desperate life, proved stronger than the bond of family." He then looked at Mia, a complex, almost pained expression on his face. "Mia, your integrity has passed the ultimate test. You have proven yourself worthy. I am activating the second part of the Legacy Protocol now. Effective immediately, you are named the new chairwoman of the Thorn Foundation. You have the authority to appoint new trustees and fully dictate the ethical direction of Ethel's research." Mia felt a dizzying wave wash over her. It was done. The dream, the impossible chance, was hers. She had navigated the labyrinth and won. But before she could speak, Elias's expression changed. A shadow of intense pain crossed his features. The same pallor that had terrified her in the bistro bathroom returned. "Father!" Damien shouted, alarm replacing rage. "Julian!" Elias whispered, grabbing his chest. "The final protocol. Now!" Julian Vance, eyes wide with panic, reached into his own coat pocket and pulled out a syringe. He was a lawyer, not a doctor, and his hands were shaking. "He's having another attack!" Vivian screamed. Mia immediately shot up and rushed to Elias's side. "His nitroglycerin! Get it!" "No, Mia!" Elias rasped, grabbing her wrist, his grip surprisingly tight. He was looking only at her, ignoring the chaos of his children. "This is not an attack. This is my end." He lifted his hand, pointing to the syringe Julian held. "Julian, no!" Mia shouted, finally understanding what was happening. Elias's voice trembled as he tried to speak. "You need to listen, Mia. The life you saved. I only asked for a year. The doctors were wrong. My heart was finished long before. I told Julian that if I survived a year, I would die naturally. But if the transfer of power happened early, he was instructed to administer an accelerant. Painless. Synthetic." The room felt like it tilted out from under her. She had saved his life, only to watch him surrender it willingly. "It was the only way to protect the legacy protocol," Elias whispered, tears forming. "They would have fought my will, dragged it through courts, commissions, medical reports. I needed my death to be final and undeniable. You needed to be in place before they could stop you. That shock, my death, was the last safeguard." Mia stared at the syringe in Julian's shaking hands, then at Elias's peaceful, collapsing smile. "You saved my life so I could die at the right time," he breathed. "You are my firewall, Mia. Live the legacy." Julian stepped forward, sobbing. Mia could barely move as the needle slid in. Elias Thorne exhaled one last, trembling breath, his grip loosening from her wrist. Then he was gone. Chaos erupted instantly. Damien roared accusations. Vivian collapsed in grief. Richard was already calling his lawyer. But Mia stood still. No longer a waitress, no longer an assistant. She was now chairwoman of the Thorn Foundation, entrusted with $1 billion legacy purchased with a life she had saved, and one that had ended by design. News of Elias Thorne's death detonated across Ethel Robotics and the world. Within hours, headlines questioned everything: the timing, the will, and the improbable elevation of Mia Thompson. His heirs launched brutal legal challenges, accusing her of manipulation and fraud. But Elias had planned for every angle. Julian presented the airtight legacy protocol, along with notarized confirmation of Elias's voluntary accelerant. Every attack collapsed under its own weight. For 6 relentless weeks, Mia lived in courtrooms and boardrooms. With Julian's guidance, she audited the foundation, uncovered misused funds, removed corrupt trustees, and replaced them with world-renowned ethical AI experts. She announced that Prometheus's recovered source code would become an open-source global oversight tool, an ethical monitor for all humanity. The public rallied behind her, silencing Damien's smear campaign. 6 months later, at the Ethel Global Summit in San Francisco, Mia stepped onto the stage before a sea of world leaders. Calm, centered, transformed. Saving a life, she said steadily, was only the beginning of securing a vision. She unveiled the Prometheus Global Ethical Monitor, technology no longer owned by Ethel, but by the world. Mia Thompson had emerged from impossible circumstances to fulfill Elias Thorne's final design, a moral compass for the future, forged from the life she saved and the legacy he surrendered. The story of Mia Thompson proves that the most powerful currency in the world isn't money, it's genuine, uncorrupted purpose. Mia didn't just save Elias Thorne's life, she became the ethical weapon he desperately needed to save his life's work from his own family. The billionaire's final, shocking reaction, the premeditated sacrifice of the life she saved, was the ultimate, dramatic twist, ensuring the former waitress secured an unparalleled position of power. She traded a dirty apron for a billion-dollar legacy built on a painful truth. If this story of dizzying ambition, ruthless family betrayal, and the power of one honest person against a world of greed impressed you, then you know what to do. Smash the like button to show your support. Share this video with a friend who loves a good corporate thriller. And most importantly, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next epic tale of a life changed forever.